At 16, I was thrown out of my home, accused of a betrayal I never committed. The accusation came from my younger brother, Mark, whose charm disguised a dangerous manipulator. My parents believed him over me, leaving me homeless and abandoned. Years later, fate twisted the script. They came back into my life, but this time they weren't holding the power. It was a Tuesday evening when the world I knew began to unravel. My father's deep voice reverberated through the walls of our small Pennsylvania home, demanding answers I didn't have. My younger brother, Mark, sat smugly in the corner, eyes glinting with triumph. "I've had enough of your lies, Jake," my father thundered, slamming his hand on the dining table. "I didn't do it," I pleaded, my voice cracking under the weight of my frustration. "You've got to believe me. Why would I even? You think we're stupid?" he interrupted, his face red with anger. "Mark saw you sneaking money out of my wallet." I turned to Mark, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Why are you doing this?" Mark leaned back in his chair, feigning innocence. "I didn't want to say anything, Jake, but I can't just stand by and watch you spiral like this." The audacity of his words made my stomach churn. Mark, the golden boy, had always enjoyed playing the victim while I bore the blame. But this was a new low even for him. "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice quieter now, almost desperate. "I swear." My mother sat stiffly, her hands clasped tightly on the table. She hadn't said a word, but her eyes betrayed a mix of disappointment and pity. That silence cut deeper than my father's shouts. "You're done, Jake," my father said, his voice low and final. "Pack your things. You're not staying here another night." I froze. "You're kicking me out? Over a lie?" "It's not a lie," Mark chimed in, his voice oozing false concern. "Maybe this is for the best, you know? Some tough love might help you straighten out." I wanted to scream, to fight back, to make them see the truth. But as my father's glare bore into me and my mother refused to meet my eyes, I realized it was pointless. They had made their choice. That night, with nothing but a backpack and $50 I'd saved from odd jobs, I walked out the door. The first few nights were a haze of cold, hunger, and fear. I drifted through the outskirts of the city, clutching my thin jacket against the biting wind. Sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by the sounds of distant sirens or the occasional footsteps of strangers. On the fifth night, I found myself in a shelter run by a man named Eddie. He was gruff but kind, with a face weathered by years of hardship. "Got a name, kid?" he asked as he handed me a bowl of lukewarm soup. "Jake," I muttered, staring into the murky liquid. "Well, Jake," he said, pulling up a chair across from me. "You've got two choices. You can wallow in whatever brought you here, or you can figure out what comes next." His words stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, Eddie became a sort of mentor, teaching me how to navigate the streets and find odd jobs. I scrubbed dishes at diners, swept floors in corner stores, and even helped unload crates at a warehouse. The work was grueling and the pay meager, but it was enough to keep me fed and off the streets most nights. It was during one of these jobs that I met Clara. She was a waitress at the diner where I washed dishes, a whirlwind of energy with an easy laugh that seemed to brighten even the dingiest corners of the kitchen. "You've got good timing," she said one evening, sliding a plate of fries toward me. These were about to go in the trash. I hesitated, then accepted the food with a grateful nod. "Thanks. You don't talk much, do you?" she said, leaning against the counter. "Not much to say." "Fair enough," she replied, her tone light. "But if you ever feel like talking, I'm a great listener." Over the weeks, our conversations grew longer. Clara had a way of making the chaos around us seem less daunting. She didn't pry, but she didn't let me retreat into myself either. One evening, as we cleaned up after closing, she asked, "So, what's your plan?" "My plan? Yeah. You don't strike me as the type to settle for washing dishes forever." I shrugged, avoiding her gaze, just trying to get through the day. She didn't push, but her question lingered in my mind. Months turned into a year. By then, I'd managed to save enough to rent a small room above a mechanic's shop. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd also started taking night classes at the community college, using what little free time I had to work toward a business degree. It was exhausting, juggling work, school, and the lingering weight of what I'd lost. But for the first time, I felt like I was moving forward. Then, one night, everything shifted again. I was walking home from class when I spotted a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost. My heart stopped. "Jake," Mark called out, his voice casual as if we were old friends running into each other. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my distance. "Relax," he said, holding up his hands. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I wanted to see how you're doing." His tone was almost convincing, but I knew better. Mark didn't do anything without an agenda. "I'm fine," I said curtly. "Now, if you'll excuse me." "Wait," he interrupted, stepping in front of me. "Look, I know I messed up. Things at home aren't great. Mom and Dad, they're struggling. And they miss you." I clenched my fists, the old anger bubbling to the surface. "They miss me? Funny. They didn't seem to miss me when they threw me out." "Jake, come on," he said, his voice softening. "You know how Dad is. He was just angry, but they've changed. They want to make things right." I stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. But all I saw was the same calculating smirk he'd worn the day he lied to destroy me. "Tell them I'm doing just fine," I said, stepping around him. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last I'd hear from Mark. Weeks passed after my encounter with Mark, but the unease he stirred stayed with me. It wasn't just the memory of betrayal or the audacity of him showing up unannounced. It was the nagging sense that his sudden reappearance wasn't just a coincidence. Life didn't allow me much time to dwell on it, though. Between shifts at the diner, night classes, and the occasional conversation with Clara, I was too busy carving out a semblance of a future to let old ghosts drag me down. One evening, I arrived at the diner to find Clara pacing outside. Her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced with a look of unease. "Jake," she said, spotting me, "there's someone waiting for you inside." "Someone?" She nodded, chewing her lip. "Older couple. They've been sitting at the corner booth for an hour, just asking for coffee. Said they needed to talk to you." My stomach twisted. I already knew who it was. "Do you want me to tell them to leave?" Clara asked, her voice soft. I shook my head, even as every instinct screamed at me to turn around and walk away. "No, I'll handle it." Inside, the diner buzzed with the usual clatter of plates and murmur of conversations. But all I could focus on was the booth in the far corner. My parents sat there, looking as out of place as ever. My mother's face lit up when she saw me, while my father's expression remained unreadable. I approached slowly, stopping just short of the table. "Jake," my mother said, her voice trembling. "It's so good to see you. What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Can we sit?" my father said, gesturing to the empty seat across from them. I hesitated, then slid into the booth. "Talk." My mother leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly together. We wanted to apologize. For everything. For how we treated you." I didn't respond. "We were wrong," she continued, her voice cracking. We let him manipulate us. And we took it out on you. It wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. My father cleared his throat. "We know we can't undo the past, but we want to make things right." I raised an eyebrow. "How?" They exchanged a glance, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Things haven't been good," my mother admitted. "Mark's in trouble again. Legal trouble. And it's cost us everything." I let out a bitter laugh. "Let me guess. You want my help." "It's not like that," my father said quickly. "We're not asking for money. We need your forgiveness. We need to fix this family before it's too late." "Too late for what?" I shot back. "For you to keep throwing your loyalty at Mark while the rest of us pick up the pieces?" My father bristled, but my mother grabbed his hand. stopping him from responding. "Please, Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just think about it." I stood, the weight of their words pressing against my chest. "I already have." I didn't hear from them again for a while, and I preferred it that way. But the encounter dredged up memories I'd worked hard to bury. Late at night, lying in the narrow bed of my rented room, I replayed their words, trying to untangle their motives. One thing was clear: I couldn't trust them. Not after everything. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past wasn't done with me. The call came 3 weeks later. "Jake." My father's voice was gravelly, weary. "What do you want?" "It's Mark," he said. "He's been arrested." I didn't respond. "Jake, this is serious," he pressed. "The charges, they're bad, and we're out of options." "Good," I said, the word cutting through the silence like a blade. "Jake, please," my father said, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard before. "You're the only one left who can help us. You made it clear a long time ago who mattered in this family," I said coldly. "And it wasn't me." "He's still your brother," my father said, desperation seeping into his tone. "No," I replied. "He's your problem." I hung up. I thought that was the end of it. But 2 days later, Clara found me during my break, holding a stack of mail. "These were dropped off for you," she said, handing me a large envelope. It was from a law firm. Confused, I tore it open and scanned the contents. My heart sank as the words sank in. My name was listed as a cosigner on a loan. A loan my parents had taken out years ago. A loan they'd defaulted on. The weight of their betrayal hit me like a freight train. Not only had they stolen my trust, but now they'd stolen my name, my future. I clenched the papers in my hands, rage bubbling to the surface. But beneath the anger was something deeper. Resolve. They wanted me to clean up their mess? Fine. But it wouldn't be on their terms. I spent the next few days buried in research, poring over every document, every contract. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. They hadn't just signed my name, they'd used me as a scapegoat for years of bad decisions. When I finally confronted them, they didn't even try to deny it. "We didn't have a choice," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We thought we could fix it before you ever found out. But you didn't," I said, my voice icy. "And now it's my problem." "We'll figure it out," my father said, though his words rang hollow. "No," I replied. "I'll figure it out. And when I do, you'll wish you'd never asked for my help." I didn't sleep much after that confrontation. My mind churned with anger, betrayal, and the cold determination to untangle the mess my family had created. I wasn't just fighting to fix what they'd done. I was fighting to ensure they could never manipulate me again. But unraveling their mess would require a plan, and for that I needed help. Clara wasn't just a friend at this point. She was my anchor. When I explained everything to her over a late-night coffee in her cramped apartment, she didn't flinch. "They really did this to you?" she asked, her tone a mix of disbelief and fury. "Yeah," I said, staring into my coffee. "And now they expect me to save them. Are you going to?" I hesitated. "Not the way they think. I have to protect myself first." Clara nodded, her eyes sharp with resolve. "Then let's figure this out." Over the next few days, we pieced together a strategy. I contacted a lawyer, an old friend of Eddie's from the shelter days, and began building a case to fight the loan and clear my name. At the same time, I started digging into my parents' financial records. What I found shocked even me. Mark hadn't just dragged them into debt. He'd convinced them to leverage their house. Asterisk asterisk, the only asset they had left. Asterisk asterisk, to bail him out of trouble again and again. Worse, he'd falsified signatures to secure loans he couldn't repay. The house was weeks away from foreclosure. My parents called me repeatedly during this time, but I ignored them. I needed to stay focused to keep my emotions in check. Finally, when my lawyer confirmed we had enough evidence to challenge the loan, I decided it was time to confront them one last time. I didn't go to their house. Instead, I asked them to meet me at a neutral spot, a quiet park we used to visit when I was a kid. They arrived together looking worn and defeated. My father's once imposing frame seemed smaller, and my mother clutched her purse like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Jake," my mother began, her voice trembling, "thank you for meeting us." I didn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "I know everything," I finally said. "About the loans, the house, Mark." My father stiffened. "We didn't have a choice." "Stop," I said sharply. "You always had a choice. You just chose him. Every time." My mother began to cry softly, but I pressed on. "I've hired a lawyer. The loan you signed in my name is being challenged, and it will be voided. You won't drag me down with you." Relief flickered across her face, but my father's expression darkened. "You think you can just walk away from this family?" "I already did," I said coldly. "Years ago. You made sure of that." "But the house," my mother started. "Let me stop you right there," I interrupted. "The house is gone. I bought the debt from the bank." Their faces froze in shock. "You what?" my father stammered. "I own the house now," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm selling it." My mother sobbed openly now, but I felt no pity. "You can't do this," my father roared, his voice echoing through the empty park. "I can and I will," I said, standing to leave. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." The sale of the house went through faster than I expected. With the proceeds, I paid off every outstanding debt tied to my name and invested the rest into a new venture, a nonprofit dedicated to helping homeless youth. Clara was by my side every step of the way. She even left her job at the diner to join the organization full-time, bringing her energy and compassion to a cause that meant everything to me. "I'm proud of you," she said one night as we worked late in the small office we'd rented. I smiled, the weight of the past finally lifting. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yeah, you could have," she said, grinning. "But I'm glad you didn't." As for my family, I heard through mutual connections that they moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Mark, predictably, vanished soon after, leaving my parents to fend for themselves. They tried reaching out a few more times, but I never answered. It wasn't out of spite, just a quiet acknowledgement that some bridges are better left burned. One evening, months later, Clara and I stood outside a newly opened youth shelter funded by the nonprofit. The sign above the door read, "Eddie's Haven," named after the man who had given me a chance when no one else would. "Think he'd be proud?" I asked, my voice soft. Clara smiled. "I think he'd say, 'Took you long enough.'" We laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The scars of my past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I had built a life on my terms, one rooted in resilience, purpose, and the people who truly mattered. And that was more than enough.